Chapter 15 of Betty Baird by Hamlin Weikel. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Holly Jensen. Chapter 15, The Order of the Cup. After a year at boarding school, Betty's first Sunday at home was an interesting experience, for her life had hitherto, in a measure, been centered in the church, so going to the pretty little brick edifice that morning was like a second homecoming. Dressed in a simple piqué suit bought in New York, and with a white chip hat crowning her fair head, her face bright and sweet with gay and tender interest, she was a picture which drew many eyes to the minister's pew, and made Miss Jane reproach herself for a sinful wandering mind, because hers dwelt so easily and gladly on the girl, when her soul needed the Father's admonitions. To Betty the day was too full for thought. She loved everybody and everything. Every familiar face and sound thrilled her with a new meaning. It is so good to be at home, they seemed to say, and all the summer this endearing insight lent a charm to every commonplace experience, but through it ran the new and vivifying emotions that her life and study at the Pines had given her. The order that she and Lois had talked of during those long days in the garden was in the background of her thoughts. In her father's library she found an old volume on the history of the Crusades, and it was seldom out of her hands. The beauty and romance of those olden days appealed strongly to the impressionable girl of 15, but mingled with them also was a keen appreciation of the glory to be found in Miss Jane's humble life of service. She used to take her little brown leather book and go into her rose retreat, as she had named that part of the garden, where the roses grew in wild profusion over a trellis and shaded a gray old rock and small rustic seat. A high arbor vitae hedge, with a narrow opening, ran around this corner and gave it still more seclusion. Here she would sit with her elbow on the rock, her face earnest with the spell of the old valiant days. Peter the Hermit, Robert, and Godfrey became as real to her as Elder Huggentugler and Mr. Dinkum. The long summer days were full of the ardor of the times of the Crusades, and the grace and nobility of knight-errantry. But the order was no more than a pleasant reverie until that day late in June, when the past and present mingled in her thoughts, as she studied her Sunday school lesson. Betty was tired of her Sunday school class, which, in the summer dearth of teachers, the superintendent had asked her to take, deeming her general intelligence and her position as the pastor's daughter, together with the aid her mother cheerfully promised, to be sufficient justification for his unusual course in asking such a young girl. She had labored faithfully to bring from the lesson some helpful instruction for the members of the class, girls near her own age, but a baffled feeling, a realization that the teaching of abstract truths was not her forte, was the invariable result. This day she studied with especial earnestness and conscientiousness. She memorized the golden text, Mark 9:41, "For whosoever shall give you a cup of water to drink in my name, because ye belong to Christ, verily I say unto you, he shall not lose his reward." She read the verses again and again, but not a thought came to her. At last she threw down her lesson leaf with something like disgust. "Oh, I can't see a thing in it for those youngsters. A cup of water? How in the world can they do that? I give it up. I'm going to tell Mr. Marley that he'll have to get someone else." Thoroughly disheartened, she took up her History of the Crusades and tried to read, but somehow there kept ringing in her ears, "A cup of water, a cup of water." Now what can that mean? A cup of water? Anybody can have a cup of water. It's such a common thing to talk about. Oh, I wonder if he could have meant that we should do the little everyday kindnesses in his name. She leaned back in her seat, her eyes closed, her face radiant, her History of the Crusades clasped in her hands. "Yes," she whispered, "the order of the cup, the order of the cup. To give a cup of water in his name, to do the little everyday kindnesses to our neighbors." She knew now how she would teach that lesson. It would be more than theory. The 10 girls in her class would help her if she only put it right. Miss Green and Miss Spice were, she knew, interested in settlement work in New York, and Miss Spice taught there evenings. They were now raising money to send poor children to the country or seaside for a day or more. Why couldn't she and her class help, giving a cup of water in this way? Her cheeks were afire with excitement as she thought of the beautiful possibility of doing something for them. Her home was only a few hours' ride from the city. Perhaps someday she could have them there, but she would go step by step and see if she could not raise money somehow for those children's outing. 11 children for one day at the seaside. The Order of the Cup, she said to herself. That's better than chivalry and crusades. She would band her girls together and form an order, and ask Lois and Edith to join it, and everyone who was willing to give a cup of water. Her ideas grew as she dwelt on the plan. Yes, they would give a festival in her rose retreat and sell ice cream and cake and lemonade and send the money to Miss Green and Miss Spice. On Sunday, in her enthusiastic way, she told the girls her plan for putting into practice the golden text. They were at once intensely interested. Their generous young hearts responded eagerly as she depicted the duty and glory of serving others, and impressed on them that the order would mean the doing of simple little everyday things, not the dreaming of doing something large and to them impossible. Out of a full heart she dwelt long and earnestly on the spirit in which the cup of water should be given. Perhaps the cup would be only the cheerful doing of some disagreeable daily task, or the remembering to say thank you sincerely. In closing, she held up what should be the ideal of the order in the words of Wordsworth, that best portion of a good man's life, his little nameless unremembered acts of kindness and of love. Mrs. Baird was delighted that Betty's unclaimed activity had taken such a direction. Seeing that the springs of the movement were pure and unselfish, she encouraged and watched over this budding altruism, knowing that one cannot too soon learn the lesson of service for others. Edith came home from a visit to her grandmother and entered heartily into the spirit of the order and the plans for raising money for the settlement by means of a festival. Betty ordered a dozen badges of aluminum in the shape of a cup, with the words, "Order of the Cup," in a scroll beneath. As these were made in town, their cost was small. She and the children wore them, much, it must be confessed, to the envy of the other children, who, however, were promised admittance to the order as soon as it was fully organized and a constitution framed. All over the village were posted notices of the festival, which the members of the order made with rubber type, every one bearing a picture of the symbolic cup and the motto they had taken for their own, Ut Possim, as I am able. The enthusiasm in the order was great, and Lois came to Weston to visit Betty and help with the festival. The lonely girl's pathetic joy at being in a house where the lovely home ways were preserved impressed on Mrs. Baird the fact that not only the poor but the rich needed the offices of the new and flourishing Order of the Cup, and her heart warmed to the pretty, gentle maiden. Lois at once became an ardent member of the order, and had 100 badges made at her own expense, to be sold to those who joined it, the money going to the fund for the city children. It was not made too easy to become one of the order. Admission was granted only after the applicant had given some evidences of her sincerity. Then, with simple ceremonies, she took a vow to do as she was able. Membership was limited to girls under 20, though later they had an advisory committee of older people, especially the clergyman of the town. Any reputable person could, by paying a small fee, become an honorary member. The sole aim of the order was personal service, to do all one was able to do for others, especially in small things. By banding together, they would be able to do this more effectually, for enthusiasm would be more readily kindled, and all efforts reinforced by numbers. The festival was well advertised, and every detail was thought out in advance by the members. The local press was supplied by Betty with copious notices, not unwelcome to the country editor, and the object of the festival was graphically set forth. Contributions of cakes, ice cream, lemons, candy, and other supplies came in abundance, and tablecloths were lent by interested mothers. The momentous day came. From early morning Betty and Lois worked valiantly, helped by the other members, and when dusk fell they could not repress a happy crow of satisfaction over the result. Everything was ready. The tables were attractively decorated with Japanese napkins in pretty patterns, with here and there large bowls of fresh-cut roses, and in Weston eyes, the master touch, dainty place cards painted with smart little ladies' heads at each plate. The girls had learned to paint these at the Pines. Colored lanterns hung everywhere through the garden, and with the coming of darkness the great round moon looked down on a place of real enchantment, while from shadowy corners soft strains of music filled the air. The members of the order waited on the tables. They were all dressed in simple white, with rosebuds in their hair, their cup badges worn conspicuously on their left shoulders, from which fell streamers of violet ribbon, the color of the order. Mrs. Baird, with characteristic benevolence, devoted her time and energy to seeing that no one was overlooked. Elder Huggentugler was master of ceremonies, and determined that his pet's venture should be a success, treated right and left, while Miss Jane was immeasurably puffed up by her elevation to the proud eminence of the cashier's desk, where each coin, as it was paid in, carried to her its message that Lizbeth was certainly whoopin' things up tonight. The elder's eyes proudly followed Betty's every motion, and once, when she had a spare moment to hang on his arm and confide to him her dreams of the order, he felt as proud as though the President of the United States had entrusted him with a great state secret. After all was over, it was pronounced the most beautiful festival ever given in Weston, an evening long to be remembered, in the words of the Weston Gazette. The order cleared $85, and this, with the $15 realized from the sale of the badges, made $100, which they sent at once to Miss Spice in a violet envelope, with the compliments of the Order of the Cup and the hope that it would enable a large number of poor city children to enjoy the balmy breezes and other delights of the seaside for one day at least. The order waxed large and prosperous until, with a chapter in each church in the town, its membership included nearly all the young girls in Weston. Naturally, such a movement attracted the attention of the pastors of the village, and at the next meeting of the Ministerial Association it provoked a good deal of informal discussion. "I feel, Dr. Baird," said Mr. Black of the Baptist Church, "that your daughter's enthusiasm and indomitable energy, combined with her firm hold on the affections of her young friends, have made it a movement of power, and that it has elements of permanency, even though it is carried on by the young." "They are growing older every year, and the church needs the young," responded Dr. Baird, pleased with this appreciation of his daughter's ability. "But," said Mr. Wells of the Methodist Church, "isn't there something fantastic about it? Its name, for instance?" "Why, I consider that an inspiration," rejoined Mr. Black. "We cannot expect young girls to go about prosaically organizing a home missionary society as we old fogies do. By all means let them have the poetic and picturesque." "True," said the conservative Mr. Wells as he thoughtfully adjusted his eyeglasses. "My daughter is heart and soul in this order, and her mother says the child has been quite changed through its means. I fear, though," and he sighed, "that I have grown hide-bound, and cannot easily adjust myself to new-fangled things." His smile was singularly pleasant and quite belied his words. "For my part," said Mr. Black, his young and sensitive face glowing, "I rejoice in this awakening among the young to a sense of their privileges and obligations to those who are less fortunate. Of course, the fundamental idea of the organization is to help with little things, bright smiles, ready sympathy, answered letters, reading to the sick, seeing the good side of people, withholding from gossip, and 1,001 little courtesies in the home and in society. In a word, Christian courtesy. My, oh my, laughed Mr. Golden of the Presbyterian Church. Mr. Black is quite an enthusiast over it. Because I have seen some of its results, responded Mr. Black warmly. Our committee on flowers, for instance, has been made up of young girls, and in spite of everything, they would at times fail us. They made one petty excuse after another. Last week was the turn of one of the most careless members, and the chairman told me that she not only went to some trouble to procure fine flowers, but took an interest in arranging them, and also cheerfully. Of course Mrs. Wicks could not refrain from asking her what had changed her so. You know Mrs. Wicks's way. She said, "What do you think that fly up the creek answered me?" "I understand my duty better now, Mrs. Wicks. I am a member of the Order of the Cup, and I want to do all I am able to do." "Order of the Fiddlesticks," was Mrs. Wicks's amiable reply, but the girl only laughed and replied, "Order of the Cup, if you please, Mrs. Wicks." "By their fruits ye shall know them," said another minister. "Our church believes in interesting the young, and I shall encourage this." End of chapter 15. Recording by Holly Jensen.